I stepped off the helicopter and felt the heat hit me like a wall. The Nevada desert in July isn't a place anyone wants to be standing around, but there I was, squinting against the sun and dust kicked up by the rotors. Colonel Bryson Bridges was waiting for me, standing straight as a fence post despite the heat. He didn't offer a hand, just a crisp nod that matched his pressed uniform. "Technical Sergeant Brooks," he said. "Good flight?" "Yes, sir," I lied. Military transports aren't known for comfort, and I'd spent the last 3 hours wedged between equipment cases. "Follow me, we don't have much time." I grabbed my duffel and fell in step behind him. The facility ahead looked like most secure military installations: concrete, fencing, and a deliberate lack of signage. Nothing about it screamed top secret, which I guess was the point. "Sir, my orders were pretty vague," I said, trying to keep up with his long strides. "Just that my expertise was needed immediately." He slowed slightly. "You're here because you're the best radar technician in the Air Force, Brooks. When systems malfunction, you find solutions others miss." That was true enough. I'd built a reputation fixing problems others couldn't, especially with experimental tracking systems. It's why they'd pulled me from my regular post at Edwards on short notice. "This is Facility 7, Bridges said as we approached the main entrance. "What happens inside stays classified at the highest level." I nodded. Nothing new there. Half my career was buried under security clearances. The door hissed open to blessed air conditioning. 2 armed guards checked our IDs, then waved us through to an elevator that took us down. Way down. I counted 6 floors before the doors opened again. "The team's waiting," Bridges said. "They've been working around the clock." We walked down a hallway lined with offices until we reached a large lab space filled with equipment I both recognized and didn't. 5 people looked up when we entered. "Everyone, this is Technical Sergeant Curtis Brooks," Bridges announced. "Brooks, meet the team." A woman in a lab coat approached first. "Dr. Peggy Gregory," she said, offering a firm handshake. "Quantum physics. I've read your paper on adaptive radar filtration. Impressive work." "Thanks," I said, surprised anyone outside military circles had seen it. A tall woman with auburn hair nodded from her station. "Ellie Norton, communications specialist." She barely looked up from her monitor, fingers moving rapidly over her keyboard. A muscular guy in tactical gear gave me a once-over. "Leroy Burns, security." His handshake felt like it could crush walnuts. The last team member practically bounced forward. "Craig Hughes, technical specialist," he said, pushing his glasses up. "It's an honor, Sergeant Brooks. Your modifications to the PAV-PAWS system were brilliant." "Just doing my job," I said, uncomfortable with the attention. "Colonel Bridges says you've got something that needs my expertise?" Dr. Gregory nodded. "We do. Follow me." She led us to the center of the lab where something sat under a protective cover. With careful hands, she pulled the cover away to reveal a metallic disc about 3 feet across. "This is Project Blind Spot," she said. "The culmination of 5 years' work." I looked at the disc. It was unlike any radar component I'd ever seen. Seamless, with a strange, almost fluid surface that seemed to shift slightly when viewed from different angles. "What exactly am I looking at?" I asked. Dr. Gregory glanced at Bridges, who nodded. "It's a device designed to create dimensional blind spots," she explained. "When activated, it renders objects completely undetectable by tracking systems." "You mean it jams radar?" I clarified. "No," she said, looking slightly annoyed. "Jamming merely interferes with signals. This creates a true blind spot, a space where conventional detection methods simply don't function. Radar, LiDAR, thermal imaging, nothing works." I circled the device, professional skepticism kicking in. "That's not possible with current technology." "It wasn't," she agreed. "Until now." Hughes joined us, tablet in hand. "The theory's solid. We've had partial success in controlled tests, but we need to scale up. That's where you come in. I studied the disk more carefully. The design principles violated everything I knew about signal processing and detection technology. It shouldn't work, but I'd been in the military long enough to know that impossible just meant no one had figured it out yet. "What do you need from me?" I asked. Bridges stepped forward. "Tomorrow morning we conduct the first full-scale field test. You'll monitor the radar systems and verify the blind spot effect. We need to confirm complete invisibility across all frequencies." I nodded, though I still had doubts. Nothing just disappears from radar without leaving some trace, a shadow, distortion, something. Physics doesn't work that way. "When do I get to examine the systems?" I asked. "Right now," Dr. Gregory said. "Craig will show you the monitoring setup. I suggest you familiarize yourself with our equipment tonight. The test begins at 600. Hughes led me to a bank of screens and equipment. Some I recognized, standard military-grade radar and detection systems. Others were custom builds I'd never seen before. "We've got everything from basic X-band radar to experimental quantum detection arrays," Hughes explained, excitement clear in his voice. "If this works, none of them will register the test object." I spent the next few hours going through the systems, checking calibrations, and trying to understand the theory behind the device. The more I learned, the more my professional doubt grew. The principles involved seemed to bend the laws of physics in ways I couldn't wrap my head around. By evening, I'd absorbed as much as I could. My eyes burned from staring at screens and technical documents. The team had dispersed for dinner, but I wasn't hungry. Instead, I stepped outside for some fresh air. The desert night was cooling down fast. I checked my watch, just past 2100 hours. The sky above was clear, stars visible in a way you never see near cities. But something felt off. I pulled out my phone and checked the weather app. Barometric pressure was falling steadily. That meant a storm was moving in despite the clear skies. I walked back inside and found Hughes still at his workstation. "Weather report mention anything about a storm?" I asked. He looked up, blinking like he'd forgotten there was a world outside the lab. "No. Clear skies predicted all week." "Pressure's dropping," I said. "Might be nothing but worth keeping an eye on." Hughes shrugged. "Desert weather can be unpredictable." I didn't push it. Instead, I found my assigned quarters, a small room with a bed and not much else, and tried to sleep. Military life teaches you to rest when you can, but my mind kept circling back to that strange disk and its impossible claims. I woke at 0430, showered quickly, and headed to the mess hall for coffee. Through a window, I noticed dark clouds building on the horizon. Not normal clouds either. They had an odd greenish tint and seemed to form patterns I'd never seen before. The lightning was wrong too. Instead of forking down from the clouds, it seemed to spread horizontally, creating spiderweb patterns across the sky. By 0500, I was back at the lab. The team was already there, running pre-test checks. I approached Colonel Bridges, who was reviewing data with Dr. Gregory. "Sir, I think we should consider delaying the test," I said. Bridges looked up, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "On what grounds, Sergeant?" "There's a storm system moving in. Unusual lightning patterns, rapid pressure drops. Not ideal conditions for sensitive equipment." Dr. Gregory frowned. "Our device isn't affected by weather conditions." "Maybe not the device itself," I countered. "But our monitoring systems could be. Atmospheric interference might contaminate our readings." Bridges checked his watch. "The Secretary of Defense is waiting for our report. We've delayed twice already due to equipment calibration issues." "I understand, sir, but—" "Your concerns are noted, Sergeant," he cut me off. "But we're proceeding as scheduled." He turned to Dr. Gregory. "Are we ready?" She nodded. "All systems go." I knew that tone. The decision was made, regardless of my concerns. I took my position at the monitoring station, running one final check on the systems. The test object, a standard drone, was positioned directly above the disk. If this worked, the drone would completely disappear from all our tracking systems when the device activated. "Beginning countdown," Ellie announced from communications. "Test commencing in 60 seconds. I focused on my screens, watching the steady blip that represented the drone. The storm was closer now. I could feel the static electricity in the air. 30 seconds. Hughes stood beside me, eyes glued to his own monitors. Burns had positioned himself near the exit, hand resting on his sidearm, standard protocol for classified tests. 10 seconds. Dr. Gregory's fingers hovered over the activation controls. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, initiating. At precisely 600, she pressed the sequence. The disk hummed to life, vibrating slightly as power coursed through it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I saw it, pale blue light bursting from the center of the disk in perfect concentric rings. The rings expanded outward, growing larger with each pulse. On my screens, the drone's signature flickered, then vanished completely. It worked. The object had become truly invisible to all our sensors. But something else was happening. The blue rings weren't stopping at the test area. They kept expanding, reaching the lab walls, then passing through them like they weren't even there. "Dr. Gregory, is this expected behavior?" I called out, but my voice sounded wrong, distorted. The blue light reached me, passed through me. Immediately, overwhelming nausea hit. My stomach lurched and the room seemed to tilt. I grabbed the edge of the console to steady myself, but it didn't help. The ground beneath my feet no longer felt solid. It shifted and rippled like I was standing on water. The blue light grew brighter, washing out all other colors until everything around me was bathed in its eerie glow. I tried to call out to the others, but couldn't find my voice. My vision began to narrow, darkness creeping in from the edges. The last thing I saw was Dr. Gregory's face, her expression changing from triumph to horror as the blue light engulfed everything. Then there was only darkness. I came to on the floor of the control room. My head was pounding. "Hello?" I called out. My voice echoed back at me. "Anybody here, Dr. Gregory, Ellie?" Nothing, just silence. I pushed myself up to sitting, wincing at how cold the floor felt. The whole room seemed off somehow. Same equipment, same layout, but everything had this strange bluish cast to it. "Hughes? Burns?" I tried again, louder this time. "Colonel Bridges?" Still nothing. I grabbed the edge of a desk and pulled myself up. My legs felt wobbly, like I'd just run 10 miles. I steadied myself against the wall and took a look around. The monitors were still on, showing readings I didn't understand. Numbers and patterns that made no sense. That's when I saw Hughes. He was sprawled across his workstation, but something was wrong. Really wrong. His body was twisted in a way bodies don't bend, like someone had grabbed him and wrung him out like a wet towel. His face, Jesus, his face. The skin was stretched across his features, pulled tight in some places and bunched up in others. His eyes were open, bulging out, staring at nothing. I backed away fast and hit the wall behind me, then I threw up. After I wiped my mouth, I made myself look again. I needed to understand what happened. Hughes was definitely dead. No one could survive. Whatever that was. It wasn't like any injury I'd seen before, not a gunshot, not an explosion. It was like his body had been reshaped by something. I had to find the others. The door to the hallway was still where it should be, but the corridor beyond looked different. The walls seemed to curve slightly where they should have been straight. I followed it anyway, calling out names as I went. "Dr. Gregory, Ellie, Burns, can anybody hear me?" I turned a corner and stopped dead. Burns was there, or what was left of him. His body was torn apart, pieces of him scattered across about 20 feet of hallway. His tactical vest was ripped open, equipment scattered everywhere. One of his arms was 10 feet away from his torso. His gun was still in its holster, unfired. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. I didn't get sick this time. Maybe I was in shock. I just stood there staring, trying to make sense of it. Burns was our security guy. 6 foot solid muscle, always alert. Whatever got to him hadn't given him time to even draw his weapon. I kept going, had to. Needed to find someone alive. The next corridor looked wrong. The proportions were off, like it had been stretched. And the lighting fixtures were embedded deeper in the ceiling than they should have been. I recognized where I was. This should have led to the communications station, Ellie's post. I found her there. Part of her, anyway. Ellie was... I don't know how to describe it. She was half in the wall. Like she'd been running and just merged with it. Her upper body stuck out, arms reached forward, mouth open in what must have been a scream. The wall around her didn't look damaged. It was like they'd melted together. I couldn't look at her face for long. Her eyes were still open. "What the hell happened here?" I said out loud, just to hear something besides the hum of the equipment. I backed out of that room fast. 3 team members, 3 bodies. I still needed to find Dr. Gregory and Colonel Bridges. The lab where we'd done the test wasn't far. The disc, that thing that was supposed to make things invisible, had to be the cause of this. Whatever happened started when Dr. Gregory turned it on. The lab door was ajar. I pushed it open slowly, not sure what I'd find. The disc was still there in the center of the room, still giving off that pale blue light, still humming. And next to it was Dr. Gregory. She was on the floor, curled around her notebook. Her body wasn't as messed up as the others, but her hands, they were bent backward at impossible angles, fingers twisted like wire. She'd been writing something when it happened. The notebook was still clutched in those grotesque fingers. I looked around the lab. No sign of Colonel Bridges. 5 of us in the room when the test started, and I'd found 4. Where was he? I moved to the windows that lined one wall of the lab. They should have shown the desert outside, maybe that weird storm that had been brewing. Instead, I saw a landscape I didn't recognize. Rolling purple-black terrain under a sky the same color. No sun, no stars, just that uniform dark purple. What looked like rocks floated in midair about 100 yards out. This wasn't Nevada. This wasn't anywhere I'd ever seen. I went back to the monitoring systems. They were still working, which surprised me. I checked the readings, trying to make sense of them. GPS was offline, communications were dead, but some of the atmospheric sensors were still functioning, and they were giving readings that made no sense. Oxygen levels were close to Earth normal, but there were gases in the mix I didn't recognize. Barometric pressure was all wrong. Radiation readings were spiking in patterns I'd never seen. We weren't on Earth anymore. That much was clear. I went back to the lab, to the disc. It was still active, still humming with that blue energy. I thought about shutting it off, but I had no idea how, or what would happen if I did. Maybe it was the only thing keeping me, alive in this place. Dr. Gregory would know. She designed the thing. I carefully worked the notebook from her stiff fingers. It took some doing, but I managed without breaking them. Then I went to her computer. Her password was still saved, thankfully, and I got in without trouble. Her final notes were on the screen, unsaved. She must have been typing them as everything went wrong. Test successful initially. Drone completely undetectable across all spectrums, but the effect is expanding beyond parameters. Energy pattern not dissipating as calculated. Dimensional membrane showing signs of instability. Attempting emergency shutdown, but the cascade effect has... That was it. She hadn't finished, but it was enough to tell me what happened. The dimensional blind spot they were creating had turned into something else. A dimensional shift. We'd been moved somewhere else. Somewhere with different physical laws judging by what had happened to my team. Then I noticed a message icon blinking on the computer. Audio file received after Dr. Gregory's last entry from Colonel Bridges. I clicked it. His voice came through full of static and distortion. "E. Brooks, if you're hearing this, you survived the shift. I made it too, but I had to move. They found me. Listen carefully, we're in another dimension, different physical laws here. That's what killed the others. Their bodies couldn't adapt fast enough. You and I must have some natural resistance, but we're not alone here. There are entities. They know we're here. They're hunting us. Stay away from the windows, stay quiet. I'll try to find you, but if I don't..." The message cut off in a burst of static. I played it again, listening for any clue about where Bridges might have gone. Nothing. I turned back to look at the disc, still glowing blue in the center of the lab. Outside the window, something moved across that alien landscape. I stepped back from the window, heart racing. Whatever was out there could wait. I needed to find Colonel Bridges. I grabbed Dr. Gregory's notebook and tucked it into my pocket. Then I took her tablet. Might have useful info on it. I checked my watch, 0730. The test had started at 600, so I'd been out for about 90 minutes. The hallway looked different now. Walls curved where they should have been straight, and the ceiling seemed higher. I walked carefully, keeping my hand on the wall to steady myself. Everything still had that blue tint, like looking through colored glass. "Colonel Bridges?" I called out, not too loud. Remembering his warning about staying quiet made me nervous. "Sir?" No answer, just the hum of the disc back in the lab behind me. I headed toward Bridges' office. Maybe he'd left more info there. The hallway kept changing as I walked, doorways appearing where there weren't any before, then disappearing when I looked back. I wasn't imagining it. The facility was physically shifting around me. At one point, I turned a corner and found myself facing a blank wall. I turned around, and the hallway I'd just come through was gone, replaced by a different corridor. That's when I knew for sure this place wasn't following normal physics anymore. I found Bridges' office after about 20 minutes of wandering. The door was open. Inside, everything was neat as usual. Bridges was always a stickler for order. His laptop sat open on the desk, still powered on. I clicked the mouse and a video recording program opened up. There were several saved files dated from today. I clicked on the first one. Bridges' face appeared on screen. He looked tired but alert. Day 1 after shift. Time approximately 800 hours. I've searched most of the West Wing. No survivors except Technical Sergeant Brooks, who remains unconscious in the control room. The facility appears to be changing. Rooms aren't where they should be. I'll continue exploring and leave these records in case I don't make it back. The recording ended. I clicked on the next one, dated 3 hours later. Day 1, 1100 hours. I've confirmed we're no longer in our dimension. The landscape outside doesn't match any known terrain on Earth. Atmosphere seems breathable but contains unknown elements. I've been hearing noises, scratching in the walls, movement in rooms I've just left. We're not alone here. I glanced at the door, suddenly aware of how quiet it was. Too quiet. I played the next recording. Day 2, 0600 hours, Brooks still unconscious. I've moved him to the medical bay, which was difficult to find as the facility layout continues to shift. I've sealed myself in the East Wing laboratory with enough supplies for several days. The disk is still active. I believe it's causing these dimensional anomalies. I'm going to try to shut it down. I frowned. Medical bay? I'd woken up in the control room, not the medical bay. Either Bridges was confused or something had moved me back. I played through several more recordings over the next hour. Bridges documented his attempts to deactivate the disk, all unsuccessful. He described the facility changing more dramatically, with rooms appearing that weren't part of the original design. In one recording, he mentioned finding a room that looked like his childhood home in Missouri. The last recording I found was labeled Day 4. Bridges looked worse now. Unshaven, dark circles under his eyes. Day 4, time unknown. My watch stopped working. Ellie Norton's body, it moved. I know that sounds impossible. She still fused with the wall, but her position changed. She tried to use the communications array. Something came through instead. I found Hughes barely alive afterward. His eyes, something had changed his eyes. They were black, completely black, and he kept repeating, "They're in the walls," before he died again. I've sealed myself in the East Wing laboratory. Brooks, if you're seeing this, try to reach me, but be careful. This facility, I think it's alive somehow. I sat back in the chair trying to process what I'd just heard. Ellie's body had moved? Hughes had been alive again? None of it made sense. But then nothing had made sense since the test. I needed to find Bridges. The East Wing laboratory was on the opposite side of the facility, assuming the layout still followed any logic at all. I gathered a few supplies from Bridges' desk, a flashlight, a multi-tool, and a half-full water bottle. As I stepped back into the hallway, I noticed something strange. The corridor looked different from when I'd entered the office just an hour ago. The door across from Bridges' office had been storage, but now it was labeled server room. I opened it cautiously and found exactly that, racks of servers humming away. I kept walking, trying to head east, but the building had other ideas. Corridors ended in walls where there should have been intersections. Stairwells led to floors that shouldn't exist. Twice I found myself back at Bridges' office despite taking completely different routes. The third time I tried, I took careful note of every turn. Left at the water fountain, right at the conference room, straight past the bathrooms, left again at the... Wait. There was no water fountain in this facility, at least there hadn't been before the test. I backtracked and found the conference room gone, replaced by what looked like a high school chemistry lab. Empty beakers sat on counters and periodic table posters hung on the walls. I'd never seen this room before in my life. "What the hell is happening?" I said out loud. My voice echoed strangely, as if the room were much larger than it appeared. I hurried out, not wanting to stay there any longer than necessary. After what felt like hours of walking, I found myself approaching the mess hall. I was hungry and thirsty, so I decided to check if there was any food or water left. The doors swung open easily. The sight inside stopped me cold. The mess hall was trashed. Tables overturned, chairs broken, food scattered everywhere. But that wasn't the worst part. Bloody handprints marked the walls and floors, some smeared as if someone had been dragged, and on the far wall, written in what looked horribly like blood, were the words, "It feeds on fear." Below that, another message. "The walls are alive." I backed away, bumping into a table. Something fell and clattered on the floor. I jumped, then felt stupid, just a fork. But my heart was racing again. "Get it together, Brooks," I muttered to myself. "Find Bridges, get to the East Wing." I left the mess hall and kept walking, trying to maintain a mental map. But it was useless. Hallways changed behind me. Doors led to different rooms than their labels suggested. At one point, I opened a door marked electrical, and found myself looking at the alien landscape outside, as if the door opened directly to the exterior without any walls in between. I slammed it shut and kept moving. Eventually, I found a door marked Armory. That was promising. Weapons would be useful if there really were entities hunting us. I opened the door and stepped inside. It wasn't the armory, it was a bedroom, a child's bedroom with blue walls and model airplanes hanging from the ceiling. My bedroom, from when I was 10 years old in my parents' house in Colorado. Every detail was perfect. The Star Wars posters, the bookshelf with my collection of Hardy Boys mysteries, the blue bedspread with fighter jet patterns. But it was wrong, too. The proportions were off, the ceiling too high, the corners of the room too sharp. On the nightstand sat a framed photograph I recognized, me with my parents, Bill and Josie Brooks, taken at Pikes Peak when I was 9. But the photo was torn, and my parents' eyes had been scratched out of the image. I picked up the photo with shaking hands. This couldn't be real. How could the facility create an exact replica of my childhood bedroom? I'd never told anyone here about it, never described it. I put the photo down and backed toward the door. As I did, I heard a scratching noise like fingernails on drywall coming from inside the closet. The closet door began to open slowly. I didn't wait to see what was inside. I ran. The scratching followed me down the corridor. I could hear it in the walls and the ceiling, sometimes ahead of me, sometimes behind. I ran faster, taking random turns, not caring where I ended up as long as it was away from that sound. As I ran past a darkened storage area, I saw something move in the shadows. A figure that looked like Hughes, but wrong. His body twisted unnaturally, his face frozen in that same distorted expression I'd seen when I found him dead. But he was moving, shambling forward with jerky motions. I didn't stop. Around another corner, I caught a glimpse of what looked like Ellie Norton, still partially embedded in the wall but reaching out with one arm as I passed. "Not real," I gasped to myself. "They're not real." I rounded another corner and crashed into a gurney, falling hard on the floor. Looking up, I realized I was in the medical bay. Bridges had mentioned this place in his recordings. Clean white beds lined the walls. Medical equipment hummed quietly. It seemed untouched by whatever chaos had affected the rest of the facility. On the central desk was a recorder, not a computer this time, but an actual handheld voice recorder. A sticky note on it said, "Play me." I picked it up with trembling fingers and pressed play. Bridges' voice came through, sounding resigned. "Final recording. I don't know if you'll find this, Brooks, but I need to tell you what I've discovered. The device didn't just transport us to another dimension. It merged us with the facility itself. The building is alive now, feeding on our consciousness, our memories, our fears. That's why you're seeing things that shouldn't be possible. The facility is reading your mind, creating environments based on what it finds there. The entities hunting us. They're projections too, manifestations of the facility's new awareness. There's only one way back, Brooks. The device has to be destroyed. It's the anchor point between dimensions. Destroy it and we might return to our own reality. I tried, but I couldn't get close enough. The facility, it doesn't want to let us go. Good luck, Brooks. If you're hearing this, you're our only hope of..." The recording cut off in a burst of static, followed by a scream that didn't sound like Bridges, or like anything human. I set the recorder down carefully. The facility was alive, reading my mind. It seemed impossible, but after everything I'd seen, I was ready to believe just about anything. I had to get back to the lab, had to destroy the device. I couldn't sleep. Not sure I'd even tried, really. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt something watching me. The facility, studying me like I was some kind of lab rat. I was sitting on the floor of what used to be a supply closet. It had a door now, which was why I'd picked it. Doors seemed important, gave me some control, even if it was just pretend. I'd been in here for hours, maybe. Hard to tell without windows or a working watch. Mine had stopped at 3:17, and I couldn't say if that was AM or PM anymore. I got up and stretched my legs. My back hurt from sitting on concrete. The hallway outside looked different again. It always did. Yesterday, if there even was a yesterday in this place, this had been a short corridor leading to the east wing. Now it stretched way farther than the building's actual size would allow. "That's new," I muttered, staring down at the impossibly long hallway. I stepped out carefully. A door appeared on my right where there hadn't been one before, just materialized right out of the wall. I backed away from it, bumping into the opposite wall. The concrete felt warm against my back, almost like skin, but it felt real enough. The floor was solid under my boots. The air smelled like ozone and something else I couldn't place. Something rotten. "Curtis." I froze. The voice was faint, coming from somewhere in the walls. It sounded like Dr. Gregory. "Curtis, help me." Another voice joined in. Ellie Norton this time. "Brooks, we're trapped. Help us." I pressed my hands over my ears. "Not real," I said again. "They're dead." The whispers kept coming, getting louder, more desperate. I started walking, trying to put distance between me and the voices, but they followed, slithering through the walls like they were alive. I'd been wandering for what felt like days, eating protein bars from vending machines that appeared and disappeared. Drinking from water fountains I didn't trust but needed anyway. Sleeping in short bursts, always with my back against a wall. This was the third day. I figured maybe time didn't work right here anymore. I turned a corner and found myself in a familiar corridor. The main lab was up ahead, the place where all this started. I approached slowly, hand on the wall to steady myself. The door was open, waiting for me. I stepped inside. The lab looked almost normal at first glance. The equipment was still there, the monitors still glowing blue. But something felt off about the ceiling. I looked up and immediately stepped back. Colonel Bridges was embedded in the ceiling, not his whole body, just his head and one arm sticking out of the concrete like he'd been swallowed by it. His eyes were open, blinking, alive. "Brooks," he said, his voice raspy. "You made it." I couldn't speak, just stood there staring. "Don't look so surprised," he said. "You heard my recording. The facility. It's alive." "Sir," I managed finally. "How are you? Still conscious?" He tried to move his visible arm, but it barely twitched. "They're inside me now, becoming part of me. Or I'm becoming part of them. Hard to tell the difference anymore." "They?" I asked. "What are they?" "Don't know," he said. "Don't think they have a name or a form we'd understand. They exist in the spaces between dimensions, and now they exist inside me." I stepped closer, forcing myself to look at him. His skin had a blue tint just like everything else in this place. "The device," he said. "You need to destroy it. It's the anchor point, the only thing keeping the breach open." "So I can get home?" I asked. His face changed then. Something like pity crossed his features. "No, Brooks, you can't go back. None of us can." He closed his eyes for a moment. "But you might stop it from spreading further. The connection works both ways. Our dimension is bleeding into this one, but this one is bleeding into ours too." I felt cold all over. "What are you saying? That Earth is in danger?" "Yes." Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. "I tried to deactivate the device. That's how I ended up here." He glanced up at the ceiling around him. They didn't like that. The ceiling around him started to move, pulsing like it was breathing. Concrete shouldn't move like that. "Go," Bridges said. "Destroy it. End this." I backed away, watching in horror as the ceiling began to stretch downward, reaching for me. Bridges let out a sound, half scream, half laugh, as his face disappeared into the mass. I ran. The corridors twisted around me, changing direction, growing narrower then wider. I took random turns, just trying to get away from what I'd seen. But every hallway seemed to curve back toward the center of the facility, toward the testing chamber where the device was. "It's hurting me," I realized out loud. I tried a door on my left, locked. Another on my right. It opened onto a blank wall. The facility wasn't just changing, it was directing me, forcing me where it wanted me to go. After about 15 minutes of this, I found myself facing the doors to the central chamber. They swung open on their own. Inside, the disc sat in the middle of the room, still glowing blue. But it wasn't a metal disc anymore. It had changed. The thing in the center of the room pulsed like a heart. It was organic now, with veins running across its surface, pumping something that wasn't blood. The blue light came from inside it, shining through the translucent skin. And around it stood 4 figures. Burns, his body still torn and mangled. Hughes, with his neck bent at that impossible angle. Dr. Gregory, her hands still twisted backward. And Ellie Norton, half of her still embedded in a wall that shouldn't have been there. They weren't solid. I could see through them like they were made of blue light. But they moved. All 4 turned to look at me when I entered. "Not real," I whispered. "You're not real." They started walking toward me, moving wrong, jerky like broken puppets. Their mouths opened, but no sound came out. I looked past them at the pulsing thing in the center, the device, the anchor point. Bridges said I had to destroy it. I spotted a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. I grabbed it and pulled it free, feeling its weight in my hands. The apparitions of my dead colleagues lunged at me. I felt cold pass through my body as they reached me, but they couldn't touch me, not physically. They were just projections meant to scare me away. I pushed through them, walking straight to the center of the room. The device pulsed faster as I approached, like it knew what I was planning. The blue light intensified, washing out everything else. I raised the extinguisher over my head. The device's surface rippled, trying to move away from me. I could feel the facility itself reacting, the walls vibrating, the floor shifting under my feet. "This ends now," I said. I swung the extinguisher down onto the pulsing mass with all my strength, determined to end the nightmare. The extinguisher connected with a sound like breaking glass. Then everything went white. I mean, completely white. I couldn't see my hands, the room, nothing. Just this blinding light that hurt my eyes. My whole body felt wrong, like I was being pulled in every direction at once. I thought I was screaming but couldn't hear anything. It felt like being torn into a million pieces and then slammed back together in the wrong order. The light started to fade and I saw the chamber walls folding in on themselves. The ceiling dropped toward the floor. The windows stretched like they were melting. Everything collapsed inward toward the device. Then nothing. I woke up to the sound of beeping machines. My eyes didn't want to open at first, like they were glued shut. When I finally got them unstuck, I saw a white ceiling with fluorescent lights. Hospital lights. The kind that make everyone look sick. My mouth felt like it was stuffed with cotton. I tried to lift my arm to touch my face, but something tugged at my hand. An IV line. Great. "He's awake," someone said. I turned my head toward the voice. Bad idea. Pain shot through my neck and shoulders. 2 guys in Air Force uniforms stood by the door. Military police. They weren't looking at me. One of them stepped outside. I took stock of myself. Both arms worked. Legs too, from what I could tell under the blanket. Everything hurt, but in a dull, distant way. Probably thanks to whatever was dripping into my IV. The room was standard military hospital issue. Beige walls, cheap blinds, a chair in the corner with my clothes folded on it. Wait, not my clothes, hospital scrubs. The door opened and a doctor came in. Middle-aged woman with gray streaks in her hair and dark circles under her eyes. "Technical Sergeant Brooks," she said. "I'm Dr. Martinez. How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," I said. My voice came out as a croak. "Where am I?" "Nellis Air Force Base Medical Center." She checked the monitors next to my bed, wrote something on her clipboard. "You've been unconscious for some time." "How long?" She hesitated. 3 weeks. 3 weeks? That couldn't be right. What happened? The others, I'm not authorized to discuss that. She shined a penlight in my eyes. Follow the light, please. I did what she asked, but my mind was racing. 3 weeks. The facility. The device. Colonel Bridges embedded in the ceiling. The ghosts of my dead colleagues. Water? I asked. She poured some from a plastic pitcher into a cup and helped me drink it. It tasted like heaven. Someone will be in shortly to debrief you, she said. Try to rest until then. Rest. Right. Like that was gonna happen. As soon as she left, I tried to sit up. My muscles protested, but I managed. The MPs watched me but didn't say anything. I stared at my hands. They looked normal. No blue tint. No distortions. Just my hands. I flexed my fingers, feeling a weird sense of relief when they moved the way they were supposed to. Time crawled by. I dozed off a couple times, jerking awake each time with the image of that pulsing blue mass burned into my brain. The last thing I remembered was bringing the fire extinguisher down on it. Had it worked? Was I back? Really back? The door opened again. Colonel Tom Ramos walked in. I'd met him a few times before the Facility 7 assignment. He was a higher-up in Air Force intelligence, the kind of officer who shows up when things go sideways. "Technical Sergeant Brooks," he said, nodding at me. "Good to see you conscious." "Sir?" I tried to straighten up. Military habit. Pain shot through my ribs. He motioned for me to relax. At ease. He turned to the MPs. "Wait outside." They left, closing the door behind them. Ramos pulled the chair closer to my bed and sat down. His face gave nothing away. "You've been through quite an ordeal." "What happened, sir?" "The others. Colonel Bridges, Dr. Gregory, Ellie, Hughes, Burns." He folded his hands in his lap. "I regret to inform you that you're the only survivor of the incident at Facility 7. I already knew they were dead. I'd seen their bodies, but hearing it confirmed still hit me hard." "What incident, sir? The test? The dimensional?" "There was a catastrophic equipment failure," he cut me off. "A gas leak that resulted in an explosion and structural collapse. A tragic accident." I stared at him. "A gas leak? Sir, that's not what happened. The device worked. It created a dimensional blind spot, but then it kept going. It tore through the dimensional membrane. We ended up somewhere else. The facility was alive. It was changing, shifting. The others died because their bodies couldn't adapt to the different physical laws. Colonel Bridges, he was embedded in the ceiling when I found him. He told me." "Technical Sergeant," Ramos interrupted, his voice sharp. "The official report has been filed. There was a gas leak that resulted in an explosion. You were found in the rubble and evacuated to Nellis. The others didn't make it." "But sir, that's not—" "The official report," he repeated slower this time, "has been filed. Do you understand me, Technical Sergeant?" The message was clear. This was the story, the only story. Whatever really happened at Facility 7 was being buried. "What about the device?" I asked. "All equipment was destroyed in the explosion." "And the project?" "Discontinued." He stood up. "You'll be debriefed more thoroughly when you're stronger. For now, focus on recovery. You're on medical leave for the next month. After that, we'll discuss your next assignment." "Sir," I said before he could leave, "what happened to Colonel Bridges' body?" Something flickered across his face. Unease, maybe. "All remains were recovered and returned to the families." I didn't believe him. Not about any of it. "Rest, Technical Sergeant." He moved to the door. "That's an order." After he left, I lay back against the pillows. A gas leak. That's what they were going with. A simple, believable explanation that would satisfy the families and keep Project Blindspot buried. I must have fallen asleep again because when I opened my eyes, a different person was in the room. A nurse with black hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her name tag read Spencer H. "Good evening, Sergeant Brooks," she said, checking my IV. "How's the pain?" "Manageable," I said. She nodded, making notes on my chart. Then she leaned closer, pretending to adjust my pillow. "Someone left something for you," she whispered. "I'm not supposed to give it to you, but—" She slipped something small and flat under my pillow. I froze. "Who?" She shook her head slightly. "Don't know. A man. Civilian clothes. Said you'd want to see it." She straightened up, speaking normally again. "Dinner will be around in about an hour. Try to eat something, okay?" After she left, I waited until I was sure no one was watching through the door window. Then I carefully reached under my pillow. My fingers found a small package wrapped in what felt like cloth. I pulled it out. It was about the size of my palm, wrapped in a handkerchief and sealed with a piece of tape. No name. No note. I glanced at the door again, then carefully peeled back the tape. Inside was a small book. Charred around the edges, its cover blackened and warped. I recognized it immediately. Dr. Gregory's field journal, the one she'd been clutching when I found her body in the lab. Most of the pages were burned beyond reading, but one page in the middle was still legible. Dr. Gregory's handwriting, small and precise. Dimensional boundaries thinner than theorized. Not walls, but membranes, permeable under specific conditions. Contact with other dimension isn't one way. Contamination works both ways. Our world affecting theirs, theirs affecting ours. The longer the contact, the more permanent the effect. Integration appears irreversible after critical threshold. I stared at the words until they blurred. Contamination works both ways. I rewrapped the journal and tucked it under the mattress. My head was pounding. Who had left this for me, and why? I turned to look out the window. The sun was setting over the Nevada desert, painting the sky orange and red. But at the horizon, just where the land met the sky, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A faint shimmer of blue light. Just for a second, then gone. I closed my eyes, but I couldn't escape the image burned into my mind. Bryson Bridges' face distorted as he melted into the ceiling, his eyes wide with the knowledge of what was happening to him. To all of us. I was the only one who made it back. The only one who knew the truth, and no one would ever believe me.